So here I am now in my brand new project which I created using that starting snapshot, which was also attached to the last lecture, so that you can simply download that starting snapshot, which was created with help of Vite and which I simply cleaned up a little bit so that we only have a few files in there. And this is now the starting snapshot we'll use to dive into React and learn about these React essentials. Now, to briefly get you started with the project we have here, a project created with Vite in this case, in the end what I do have here is an index.html file, which isn't too important for us here, because we won't add any code to that. Instead, we will work in the source folder where we have some .jsx files. And in the end, these are JavaScript files that also support HTML code inside of them. This special syntax which I mentioned, which is not supported by browsers, but which is transformed under the hood by the project setup we have here into code that is supported by browsers. This syntax of having HTML in JavaScript is called JSX, and that's why these files have these special JSX extensions. But again, this is not supported by the browser, this is transformed under the hood instead. What's also worth noting is that I have a CSS file here with some basic CSS styles, and this file is also being imported here into a JavaScript file in the end. Normally, this would also not work in the browser, but this is another feature supported by this project, which is then transformed under the hood. And you can kind of see what it's being transformed to by opening up the developer tools in your browser for this starting snapshot website. And there in the head section, you, for example, see that a bunch of scripts and styles were injected. For example, the styles that were defined in this extra CSS file. So this project setup and some tools that were installed as part of this project setup simply detected this CSS import and therefore included this CSS code in the final website that's being loaded. You also see that a JavaScript file is being loaded here, which, if you take a look at it upon loading this website, in the end contains the transformed JavaScript code, where you no longer see HTML code as part of the application, but where you instead have some raw optimized JavaScript code, which in the end is responsible for outputting on the screen what we see here. So that's what we got, that's what we'll start with. That's this special JSS syntax, which will become important when working with React. And with all of that out of the way, let's now take a closer look at the code we have in these two JSX files, because there we have some strange code which clearly seems to be responsible for outputting hello world, but it probably makes sense to understand how these different code pieces work together and what's happening here.